Good morning. We got all kinds of stuff to go through today. If anybody did any pre-reading here, but we're picking up with Genesis chapter 37 as we are continuing on. So Genesis 37, and just as a little bit of a kind of a preface, with Genesis 37, when we get this mark of like, here are the generations of, this is going to be the 10th and final section of Genesis. So 10th and final section of Genesis as we are getting into now this looking at Joseph and his brothers and everything that's going to be happening with them. So a lot going on. Okay, any questions before we get going? Genesis 37, yeah. Genesis 37. Okay. Well, let's open with prayer and then launch out here. Heavenly Father, we thank you that you come to us and that you continue to sustain us and call us to you even in the midst of our brokenness. We pray that you would forgive our sin, that you would renew your spirit working within us, that we might follow in the way that you would have us go, regardless of the circumstances of this life. Guide us as your people and bless us by your word today as we study it and live by it in your name. Amen. Genesis 37:1, Jacob, right? Because we had at the end last week, we kind of talked about Esau, right? And all of the descendants there, and went through that list of all of the different fancy names that probably nobody's going to be naming their kids after. Some do, but they're a little bit challenging. Don't exactly roll off the tongue, right? But now getting back and focusing on Joseph. So Joseph, whose son was Joseph? Remember back? He was Jacob, Israel, and who's his mother? You didn't know there was going to be a quiz right at the start. Rebecca, right? No, not Rachel. Rachel, the other R name. So, what was special? What was special about Rachel? She's beautiful, but she was the favored wife, right? So Israel's favored wife because he got tricked. Jacob, the trickster, got tricked and married Leah, right? Leah first. And there was that we've heard all this stuff already about how there's been this stuff between the two sisters, and then their servants, how they gave them to Jacob to have more sons, more children. So all that stuff. So it's a very complicated family dynamic is probably the easiest way to say it. But Jacob is the firstborn of Rachel, the beloved wife. So he is. We'll hear about this, kind of how he has this favored son status. So Jacob, Yaakov, the Israel lived in the land of his father's sojournings in the land of Canaan. So Joseph. Oh, did I say Jacob before? That's why you guys were confused. Joseph. So Joseph, we're getting into him. So these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, all right, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. What's significant about that? Guys, how many wives did his father have? Really? Well, 2, and then the 2 concubines, right, / maidservants, so all these different children. So here you've got Bilhah and Zilpah, who are the concubines. So they're going to be about the same age as Joseph, because his other brothers would be older. The brothers of the ones who are descendants of Leah, or the children of Leah. So like his half brothers. So they're older. So he's about 17, but he's about the same age as these other boys there. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. Just kind of one line there. So is he tattling? Yeah, kinda, but maybe he's reporting some evil thing that they did, or some wicked thing that they did, and bring it to his father. So, all right, we got that. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his sons, because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a robe of many colors. The many-colored robe, right? And the Hebrew is a little uncertain. It could mean like a long-sleeved robe, but the main thing for us to remember is it's fancy, it's special, it's distinctive. And when it says that Jacob made this, it's possible he did, because in ancient Egypt, the men would be the weavers. So the women might make the threads and the fabric, or the yarn or materials. The men would weave. So it's possible that he made it specifically for Joseph as this very distinctive thing. And that'll play into the story in just a little while long here. But when his brothers saw that their father loved Joseph more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. So they knew who was the favored son, right? They knew who was the one. Now, was he the firstborn? Not totally, right? Reuben, remember Reuben? We'll talk more about him in a little bit. He was the firstborn of the first wife. But we see here how parental favoritism is not exactly going to be doing a good thing for the rest of the family. Because it's not saying that, oh yeah, this is totally cool that Jacob favors Joseph above all the rest of his sons. Like, no, that's gonna cause problems. But we're gonna see how God's gonna work despite those problems. Okay. Now, it gets better. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf." His brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us? Are you indeed to rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. So you've got Israel's family here, right? They are semi-nomadic in the sense that they kind of pick up and move, but they also grow crops. And when they'd have harvest, they would bind the crops together for cutting off, for bringing in. So you've got this image of these bound sheaves where Joseph's is the one that all the rest bow down to. What do you think about how do his older brothers feel about this? Right? Jealous, and like, this is crazy talk. You're the kid. Why would we bow down to you? And who do you think you are to just be telling us this stuff? You had this dream that all this was going to be happening. So they already don't like him, and now it says you hated him even more. So they're building up steam. All right, but it keeps going. Then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers. Didn't learn the first time. And said, "Behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you?" And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. So who in the dream, who's the interpretation of the dream here is happening by the rest of the family. And who are the different characters in the dream? Who's the son? No, the S-U-N, sorry. The sun and the moon. The parents. So Israel. But who's the moon? The mom, but Rachel's dead. So here it's Leah. So it's Leah, right? Because she's now with her sister. Her sister died, right, in birthing Benjamin. So we got Leah, Israel and Leah, and then the rest of the brothers bowing down. And Israel is rightly saying, you are to be respecting your parents. You're not supposed to be saying that your parents are going to be bowing down to you, that you're going to be over your parents. So he's right in saying that. So it's not that Joseph in this is without blame, kind of in how he's conveying these things to the people around him. It's coming across as kind of boastful, as arrogant. Now, the fact that he had the dream, okay, that's one thing, but how he's conveying it is another. So his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. His father, listening to his favored son, hears this thing and remembers it. So let's see what happens. We've got the stage set. Verse 12. Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." And he said to him, "Here I am." So he said to him, "Go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring me word." So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a man found him wandering in the fields, and the man asked him, "What are you seeking?" "I am seeking my brothers," he said. "Tell me, please, where are they pasturing the flock?" The man said, "They've gone away, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. So you can imagine this, the brothers, it's a good amount of brothers. So he's got, if it's not him, if it's not Benjamin, there's 10 others. So a good size of these young men with probably a sizable flock going through the area. So it's not unreasonable that somebody who's kind of a passerby, or word has spread in the region about this group that's going through. And they've moved on. They're not here at Shechem. They've moved on to Dothan, which is probably maybe like 17 miles or so farther away to go over there. So Joseph goes and he finds them. Now, verse 18, they saw him from afar. How did they see him from afar? He's got his fancy cloak, his fancy robe, right? It's like, oh, we know who this is. And as they see him, before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. Like, this is our chance. This kid has been a thorn in our side for who knows how long, right? They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams. So they've got this plan for a cold-blooded murder. Perfect crime, right? Get him. We're away from everybody else. We kill him, throw him into one of these pits, these cisterns that people would dig, right, to store water, rainwater. We'll throw him in there and say that a wild animal got him. And who's to say any different? Because there aren't going to be any witnesses. But when Reuben heard it, who was Reuben? You say? The oldest. Right? He said, shed no blood, throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand and restore him to his father. Why would Reuben be looking to get back into his father's good graces? Well, he's the oldest, but what did we hear he did? Remember we look back? No, let's look back at, where was this? Chapter 35, verse 22. What is it? No, that was before. That was a generation, but that was Esau. He slept with his father's concubine. And Jacob, Israel, heard of it. So he was the oldest son is definitely not the favored son. So now if he does this, if Reuben rescues Joseph and restores him back to his father, hey, that's going to look pretty good for him, right? So he's decided, okay, so I'll do this and then restore him. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore. It's like, here's that robe. Here's this thing it definitely identifies Joseph. We're going to hear about Joseph and his robes here again in a little bit. And they threw him into a pit. So they took him to one of the cisterns that was there. It was dry, the dry season. So they threw him in there. Pit was empty. There was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat. What does that say about the brothers? They don't care. They're like, whatever. He's dead to us. We don't care. We're going to eat. And looking up, talk about timing. They saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Who are the Ishmaelites? Descendants of Ishmael. Who's Ishmael? Abraham's firstborn son through Hagar. Right? So this is, if you think about it this way, these are the descendants of their great uncle? These boys here, it's the descendants of their great uncle. Family stuff keeps coming back up. So Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? So why kill him and why cover him up? How about we do this instead? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. So, okay, let's not kill him. Let's sell him. Because he's family. And who are they selling him to? Family. You guys see what's going on? This is the Ishmaelites there, right? So the brothers listened to him. Then Midianite traders passed by. Now the Midianites, they are also, so there's kind of some interchangeability here between Ishmaelites, Midianites, because the people of Midian are also related to the children of Israel here. So the Israelites, the Midianites, or not the Ishmaelites, the Midianites, they passed by. They drew Joseph up lifted him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. So the 20 shekels of silver is not a coin. They didn't really use coins. It's more like a weight, but kind of the standard price for a male slave back then. So they sell him, they get their money, and the Ishmaelites, the Midianites, go on their way down to Egypt with all this stuff for doing some trading. Verse 29, when Reuben returned to the pit, so I guess he was away at this point, and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, he tore his clothes and returned to his brothers and said, "The boy is gone, and where shall I go?" Then they took Joseph's robe and slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in the blood. And they sent the robe of many colors and brought it to their father and said, "This we have found. Please identify whether it is your son's robe or not." And Israel identified it and said, "It is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces." So the brothers are thinking, what? Mission accomplished. We got rid of him. Dad has bought into the deception. We're good to go. Everything's coming up roses. Then Jacob tore his garments. So think about it's that sign of grief, right? But it's also mirroring what happened to Joseph's robe. Torn. He put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, "No, I shall go down to Sheol to my son mourning." Thus his father wept for him. So Jacob, Israel here, he's going to go far beyond what the standard mourning would be for somebody. He's going to keep it with him for the rest of his life because his favored son is, he believes, dead. Now, as the brothers, right, because it says the brothers were comforting him, again, what does that say about the brothers? They're deceiving, right? Because they could comfort him by saying, "Oh no, he's alive. We kind of sold him into slavery. Sorry about that." They don't. They keep up the pretense and offer this false comforting. So meanwhile, the Midianites had sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. All right, so what do you guys think about what's happened so far here? Yeah. Yeah. The brothers apparently did not know Reuben's intent to rescue him, because at that point they were still looking to kill him. It was then Judah who says, rather than kill him, let's sell him.
So therefore, what does it mean then when Reuben says, "Where can I turn now?"
Yeah. So basically, Reuben's still the oldest, right? So who is probably going to get more blame or more shame from his father? Is the oldest. It's like, all right, this is even worse. I had this plan. I was gonna get some favor back from Dad, and now it's gonna be even worse because he's gone. I can't restore him. Where's my hope for that now? Okay. Anything else from this? That just so you guys know, this is not how families are supposed to work. Okay, this is all kinds of messed up. And the brothers they're still doing a wicked thing, even though they didn't kill their blood, selling him into slavery, getting rid of him this way, out of what? Spite, jealousy, envy, all these things, all that happening. But God is going to do something through all this. Spoiler alert. Okay, anything else before we move on? Now we have, Jan.
Don't you think the brothers would have questioned that statement?
What am I going to do now? Not necessarily, because if they probably heard about what Reuben had done as well, and he didn't come up with the idea to kill their brother, right? So they're probably like, yeah, tough luck. They don't really seem to be all that sympathetic based on what they're doing here. Yeah.
Somebody reads this for the first time, and like me, they're just thinking, "Wow, I can't wait to see how this ends. Where these brothers are really going to get it.
Yeah.
They're going to really get it from God, but God's setting this up. I think to how evil they are, and then I know how it ends.
Well, that's our human reckoning of things, right? Is that, well, these guys, they should get what's coming to them.
What God wants is at the end.
Yeah.
It's not what we think it.
It's amen. Yeah. It's this farther thing, this surprising thing that people couldn't have predicted. And that kind of is a nice segue into chapter 38. Because this is probably I think you could safely say one of the more sordid chapters in all of the Bible. So are you ready for it? Okay. Tell you, things like Game of Thrones or other shows like that, I tell you, there's sex, violence, political intrigue. They have nothing on what's in the Bible. If you just go take a look, these are real people, right? This is real stuff. This is nothing new. Okay, so let's see what happens here. Chapter 38. It happened at that time. So after this, and Israel is mourning for his lost son, Judah, right, one of the brothers. It happened at that time. The Judah went down from his brothers and turned aside to a certain Adullamite whose name was Hira. And as we hear later, Hira's kind of like a buddy of Judah, so that they apparently get along with other people in the land. They're living peaceably there. But so let's say Hira is maybe Judah's drinking buddy, his good friend, something like that. So he's going to go hang out with him for a while. There, Judah saw this daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua. He took her and went into her, and she conceived and bore a son, and he called his name She conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. Yet again she bore a son, and she called his name Shelah. Judah was in Shezeb when she bore him. So Judah hangs out with his buddy Hira. He sees this Shua's daughter. We never actually hear her name, but when he says took her as a wife. So he has this wife, unnamed wife, and she has these three sons, Onan, Shelah. All right? So they're there, and this is one of those things that's not necessarily a detailed chronology, but apparently as grew to be older, Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. So it would be the role of the father to find a wife for his sons. So he's found a wife for his oldest son, But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. So we don't know what he did, but there's kind of this wordplay that's going on here. Because we could say, if we wanted to say it in English in a little bit more a way that conveys what's here in the text, we could say that erred. Because that name, right, is the opposite of ar, which is evil or wicked in Hebrew. So ard. When you say erd. But so there's a lot of Hebrew word plays that are going on in the scriptures. But they're kind of saying that there. So we don't know what happened, but so the firstborn, God kills him, puts him to death because of whatever wickedness that he had done. Then Judah said to Onan, "Go into your brother's wife and perform the duty of a brother-in-law to her and raise up offspring for your brother." So what's the duty of the brother-in-law? So, well, to marry the wife or to have sexual intercourse with her so that she will have children and they will be reckoned as the dead brother's descendants. So that's part of how this was, so that if a woman was widowed without having children, right, then the brother-in-law would perform this duty, right, so that she might have children of her own counted as the deceased brothers. So that, why is that significant? Because it's about keeping the line going, right? So that in that way, it's kind of like the brother-in-law is serving as like a proxy for his deceased brother. So that's the understanding here. So, and what does that mean? Because was the firstborn, what does that mean about his descendants? They get the big part of the inheritance, right? And any of the promised blessings. We've heard about this before with the firstborn, so that children through his brother then would still be receiving that extra blessing and things like that. Okay, so here we go. But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his, because they would be counted to his brother, right? So whenever he went into his brother's wife, he would waste the semen on the ground so as not to give offspring to his brother. So if you want to be clinical about it, whenever they were having sexual intercourse, he would withdraw so that she couldn't get pregnant. So this is birth control. It is. I mean, that is a practice for birth control. But why was he doing it? So she wouldn't get pregnant, because the children would not be counted as his. And if she doesn't have children, who gets the inheritance? Onan does. Right? So, riddle this, why doesn't he just not have sex with her? Because then there's no issue. Well, he's still not fulfilling his duty. Like he's intentionally not fulfilling his duty. He still wants to have sex with her. He still wants to have sex with her. He just doesn't want to give her children. So what is this saying about his character? He's being pretty selfish, right? So he doesn't want to fulfill his responsibilities. He just wants to get the benefits. So he's being selfish in that way, right? So verse 10. And what he did was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and he put him to death also. So there's, again, Onan, things are not trending well. All right, then Judah. So Judah, the father-in-law, said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow in your father's house till Shelah, my son, grows up. For he feared that he would die like his brothers. Why would he think that? If his son marries the black widow here, right? The other two did. Exactly, right? So his two older sons die after being given this wife Tamar, right? So Tamar went and remained in her father's house. So Judah says, what? Okay, I will give you, when my youngest son is of age, then he can be your husband to give you children, to give you descendants. Reckoned then as the eldest. Okay. Any questions so far? There's a lot that's already gone on here. All right. Now, you might wonder, why is all this in here? We'll talk about that. Okay, so Tamar is staying with her father-in-law. Very good. In the course of time, the wife of Judah, or she stays with her father, sorry, not her father-in-law. In the course of time, the wife of Judah, Shua's daughter, died. Again, we still don't get her name, but she dies. When Judah was comforted, he went up to Timnah to his sheep shearers and his friend Hira the Adulamite. We hear about Hira again. He's going to go hang out with his buddy. But at this point, when it says in the course of time, it apparently Shelah is of age, but Judah has not kept his promise. He hasn't given his youngest son to Tamar to be her husband. So apparently his intent is that he's not going to do this because, hey, the last two sons, they both died, I'm not going to risk it with the third one. So he goes up to Hira the Adullamite, and this time of sheep shearing and things like that. It would be a festive time. There would be a good amount of celebrating, partying, drinking, probably, that'd be happening with this sheep shearing that'd be going on as well. So we got that. So when Tamar was told, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep, she took off her widow's garments and covered herself with a veil, wrapping herself up, and sat at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown up, and she had not been given to him in marriage. So she's figured it out. Judah has no intent of giving his son to her. So she decides she's going to take matters into her own hands. Verse 15. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. Well, okay, let's get into this. Why does he think she's a prostitute? Well, she's dressed like a prostitute. She's sitting in a place where a prostitute would sit, looks like a duck, quacks like a duck. So, all right, so Judah thinks she's a prostitute. So he turned to her at the roadside and said, "Come, let me come into you." For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. She said, "What will you give me that you may come into me?" He answered, "I will send you a young goat from the flock." And she said, "If you give me a pledge until you send it." He said, "What pledge shall I give you?" She replied, "Your signet and your cord and your staff that is in your hand." So his personal sign, probably like a necklace or something like that he had, his staff, so these kind of personal things. So give these to me as a pledge until you send me this young goat. So kind of the IOU, I guess you could say. So he gave them to her and went into her, and she conceived by him. Then she arose and went away. Taking off her veil, she put on the garments of her widowhood. So she goes back home. When Judah sent the young goat by his friend the Adullamite, his buddy Hira, right? So he's kind of his proxy going to deliver this young goat. He didn't find her. He asked the men of the place, "Where is the cult prostitute who was at Enaim at the roadside?" And they said, "No cult prostitute has been here." Here's using a different word here. He's kind of saying, rather than, it's because there's a different word for like prostitute of just like we might think prostitute today. And then there's this other word for the cult prostitute. And the cult prostitute would be somebody, and I think we've talked about this before, right? Somebody who would be kind of in the service of a pagan deity, so that, because agricultural society, agrarian society, the Baal worship and the worship of the foreign gods and idols was such that, well, if you wanted it to rain, then you would go and you'd have sex with a cult prostitute. And then Baal and Asherah, they would see the people having sex, and then they'd want to have sex because they see the people having sex, and when they did, then it rained. That's kind of the mentality here. So the cult prostitution is a bad thing because it's outside the design that God has for people, plus it's pagan worship. But Hira, he's using this more polite thing, saying, "Oh, this cult prostitute," as opposed to just what we say, maybe a woman of ill repute, something like that, or a prostitute there. So he's kind of trying to be a little bit more polite about these things. And they say, "Oh, no, there's no cult prostitute here." So he goes back to Judah, his buddy, and said, "I have not found her." Also, the men of the place said, "No cult prostitute has been here." Well, that's odd, because Judah's pretty sure there was. So Judah replied, "Let her keep the things as her own, or we shall be laughed at." Why? She got him, right? She's pulled one over on him. It's like, where did people learn to pull all these tricks and stuff like that? It's a tricky family. even by marriage, right? So we would be laughed at. So he's like, all right, so just let her keep them. We'll just keep going, because otherwise he'd be embarrassed. All right. You see, I sent this young goat. You did not find her. Now, verse 24. About 3 months later, Judah was told, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has been immoral. Moreover, she is pregnant by immorality. How would they know that? She's showing, right? 3 months pregnant. And it's immoral because she's not married. She was married to and then Onan, and then, been waiting, but she's not married now. So she's pregnant by immorality. And Judah said, bring her out and let her be burned. So that's maybe a law among the Canaanites, because Judah's dwelling with the Canaanites there. As she was being brought out, she sent word to her father-in-law, by the man to whom these belong, I am pregnant. And she said, please identify whose these are, the signet and the cord and the staff. Because whose are they? His. Then Judah identified them and said, she is more righteous than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah. And he did not know her again. So Judah recognizes Judah's been called out, because he didn't do what he was supposed to do. And then he says, all right, you got me. You got me good. Fair enough. When the time of her labor came, there were twins in her womb. And when she was in labor, one put out a hand. And the midwife took and tied a scarlet thread on his hand, saying, this one came out first. But as he drew back his hand, behold, his brother came out. And she said, what a breach you have made for yourself. Therefore his name was called Perez. Afterward, his brother came out with a scarlet thread on his hand, and his name was called Zerah. So what happens? Judah's sons, through his daughter-in-law, are being born. And one, again, we have these twins. Does this sound familiar at all? They're apparently like wrestling in the womb here too. The one comes out, the firstborn, they tie the cord on. It's like, oh no, okay, so so we remember the firstborn when he comes out, but nope, back in, and then his brother comes out, and Prez means breach, right? It's like he's bursting forth. So the secondborn, again, or would-be secondborn, becomes the firstborn. So there's this reversal that's happening here. And then Zerah comes out. Now, why do we have all this stuff in here? Well, if you keep going down the line through Judah, Perez becomes the father of this leading clan of Judah, and ultimately an ancestor of King David. And who is King David an ancestor of? Jesus. So through this stuff here, the Savior, this is the Savior's line. What do you think about that? Don't really talk about this much, huh? So God works through this human brokenness to deliver the line of the promise. Because we're going to be spending time talking about Joseph, right? A whole bunch more stuff about Joseph. Joseph is not the one through whom the line continues. God's going to work through Joseph to make sure that the line is preserved, but he's not the one. It's Judah. And Judah through Tamar, and through all this stuff that happens. Ultimately, we get King David, we get Jesus. Okay, any questions, comments, ponderings? Where was the righteous? oh, she is more righteous than I. So that, right, so that Tamar was recognizing that I've been promised children through this family, and I have not been given them because Judah has been holding out. Judah had not done his duty in giving his youngest son to her. That was what righteousness was supposed to be. He didn't do that. He wanted to keep his son safe or whatever. So he held him back. But still, again, we have people looking to think, okay, well, I'm supposed to have a son through this line, so what am I going to do? People taking things into their own hands to try to make stuff happen. Nothing new, right? We've been seeing that time and time again. It repeats itself. Yeah. Maybe just because the past two did, and it wasn't trending in the right direction. It's probably, he kind of looks like, all right, well, one, okay, that's one off. Two, oh, that's different. He wasn't willing to risk the third. Was it fool? It's a different kind of thing, but like fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, or fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. But yeah. Okay, are you guys ready for one more? I think we do one more chapter. Okay. And now we flash back. We shift focus again here to chapter 39. Now, Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. So Joseph's relatives had bought him and then sold him to this fellow Potiphar, who was an important official, somebody who had a significant role in the kingdom of Egypt here. And so he's now under this household. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. So Potiphar's his master, but he's apparently, lots of good things are happening wherever Joseph is at. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight, Potiphar's sight, and attended Potiphar. And he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him overseer in his house over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in house and field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. So God blessing Potiphar richly through Joseph and his household, so that Joseph is now put in charge. He's the manager of the household. Somebody that had been sold into slavery was now there and was running everything in the house, except for the food, because apparently there was an Egyptian cultural thing that you didn't either trust foreign-born slaves to take care of the food, or you didn't eat with them. But everything else, Joseph is running, and God is blessing it all. Any questions at this point? Amen. God is taking care of Joseph. That's right. And taking care of him and prospering him, right? And blessing other people because of him. So that even though his brothers had this wicked plan for him, God is taking this and using it to keep Joseph and do good things. Now, we're about to see it's not going to be consistent, like that's always everything coming up Joseph, right? So let's see what happens. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. So he's still probably like maybe 18, 19, 20, kind of in that age range here, right? Handsome in form and appearance. And after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in his house, and he's put everything he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me, except yourself, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her or to be with her. So now Joseph's in this tricky position, right? Because so he's this trusted person within Potiphar's house. Maybe he's kind of more friendly with Potiphar now because Potiphar doesn't trust him with everything, and he's said, "Oh yeah, I trust you. It's all yours to do with and to manage." But the wife, she's attracted to Joseph. She wants to have sex with Joseph. But who also is Joseph under? The wife, right? Potiphar's wife would still be in charge of Joseph. Even though Joseph's in charge of the rest of the household, she still has authority over him. So he has to kind of walk this line because he respects Potiphar, but can't be like outright disrespectful or continually like declining orders, if you will, given to him by Potiphar's wife. All right, so that's where we're at, verse 11. But one day, when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house were there in the house, that's odd, she caught him by his garment. It's like his outer robe, right, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. So she's literally grabbed him and is like, "All right, we're doing it." He's like, "Nope." He leaves the coat behind. Just gets out of there. Removes himself from the situation. And it's possible, this whole thing with none of the men in the house there in the house, whether it was an opportunity or whether she arranged it and had everybody else go outside the house. She kind of had a plan here. So he's gone, but he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. So as soon as she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled out of the house, she called to the men of the household and said to him, "See, he," her husband, "has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. As soon as he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried out, he left his garment beside me and fled and got out of the house." So what's she saying? She has the evidence. Oh no, Joseph, he came, he was trying to rape me. So but here I've got his robe. I cried out for help. So she is like so either embarrassed or angered by his continued rebuffing, and now this. It's like, all right, I'll show him. He thinks he's better than me. Here's what we're going to do. So she has this. Then she laid up his garment by her until his master came home, until Potiphar came home. And she told him the same story, saying, "The Hebrew servant whom you have brought among us came in to me to laugh at me. But as soon as I lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garments beside me and fled out of the house." So she's got her story here. As soon as his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, "This is the way your servant treated me," his anger was kindled. Now, we don't know if he believed her or if he had figured it out, because maybe he'd seen how she was looking at Joseph. Maybe he had, maybe he had paid attention, but he was upset that he was now going to be having to lose his favored servant here. But Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in prison. So that's not great, because Joseph is being unjustly accused, unjustly imprisoned. I mean, he could have been put to death. That easily could have been a punishment for this offense. Instead, he's put in the prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. Sound familiar? Yeah. Because God is continuing to, even though these bad things have happened to Joseph, he is continuing to guard him and to prosper him and bless those who are around him. And that the stuff that's under Joseph's care is doing well. Still, not great, because Joseph sold into slavery. He's then falsely accused of this crime, thrown into prison, far from home, in prison. Not great stuff. But God is still doing good things through him to the people around him. And it's being recognized. Right? Potiphar recognizes what's happening. The captain of the prison recognizes it. So that's all good. Any questions or thoughts at that point? Okay. All right. So we have probably more familiar stuff that's going to be coming up. We will not have class next week for Holy Week. So we've got enough other stuff going on. So we will continue the week after. So I think is that the 20th? Wednesday the 20th? So we'll pick back up then. But I do encourage you to come and join us for the many special services that are happening next week. We will still have the Wednesday AM service will be kind of our flashback to Palm Sunday, Sunday the Passion. So if anybody normally comes to that service, we'll still have that one. But then Thursday, noon, 7 o'clock for Maundy, Thursday. Good Friday, noon, 7 o'clock. And then for Saturday, we'll have the Great Vigil of Easter, which is going to be really cool. We'll start, it's probably going to be too cold to start out. Well, we'll see. We'll see if it's warm enough to start outside. We'll have the fire pit outside, bring in the new flame of Easter and have that service. If you haven't been to it before, it's very cool. Kind of it has this movement from darkness to light as we're transitioning from Lent into Easter. So that's Saturday at 6. And then Sunday morning Easter services at 6:30, 8, 9:30, and 11. So basically starting at 6:30, services every 90 minutes. And we'll have those all Easter morning, and then the Easter breakfast will be happening in here in the fellowship hall, starting, I think, maybe at 7. I'm not sure exactly on the time of that, but all that's coming up. Any questions about any of those things? Schedule, services, stuff that's happening? So this Saturday will be regular schedule for services. It's the following, so it's Easter weekend will be the different one. Yeah, so this weekend we'll have our Palm Sunday, Sunday the Passion services, regular time, Saturday 6 o'clock, Sunday at 8, 9:15, and 11. Rosie has retired, so no more Rosie. So we will not have that, but we will have procession. We will have palm branches, and some special stuff happening with the services there. Yes. So that's an important thing. So that's the other news. So as of April 1st, we're sending out a few other things have been going on. I haven't had a chance to send out the email, but yes, we did talk about it in worship on Sunday. So we did close on the new Timberlane building up for Emmanuel North. So that's very exciting. So we will send out an email to the congregation with that. There will be a closing service for the Countryside Mall site this Sunday as part of the Palm Sunday, Sunday the Passion service. So there's going to be a decommissioning there of that site. And then there'll be last worship service there. And then the first service is going to be at the new site is going to be on Easter Sunday. So we will have that service up there. And that will be regular time, right? On Easter Sunday, 9:30. Yeah. Yes. So yes, they'll be bringing in the elements and sanctuary adornments as part of that, and some flowers and I think stuff too. Talking with Pastor Wagner yesterday, so that'll be pretty cool. So yeah, so if you worship up at North, there will be that happening up there on Easter Sunday, 9:30 a.m. So we're looking forward to that. And then there will be, when we have a date set and things are more ready, there will be like a big dedication service for the whole congregation happening in the future. So we'll be sure to get the word out with more information on that too. Okay? Any other questions? Cool. All right. So no class next week for Holy Week, but we will pick up the following week with chapter 40. We're getting there. All right. Thanks, everybody.